This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show, where we celebrate the role players, the underdogs, and the great stories in sports. And our Moonlighter for today is one of the most successful high school baseball coaches ever in the state of Iowa. He has won 5 state championships. He's already got his name etched in the record books all over it. And the funny thing is, he's not even 40 years old. His name is Michael Barta. And actually, when I moved to Des Moines, I was living with my buddy Gabe Schultz, and I wanted to get into coaching. At that time, I was single, and I still had so much passion for baseball. I mean, I still have so much passion for baseball too today, but I just don't have the time to coach. But at that time, all I had was time. I was living with Gabe. I was living with my buddy Jordan Kryenbrink, and Gabe and I really wanted to coach. So Gabe at the time was teaching in the Johnston school system, so he and I both interviewed to be baseball coaches over at Johnston High School. At that same time, Johnston had a new head varsity baseball coach whose name was Michael Barta. And I actually knew Michael Barta from growing up because he went to Carroll Kemper High School. I've had plenty of cousins go to Kemper, and they were a small Catholic school in the state of Iowa. We played Kemper in like CYO tournaments. Every now and again, we would play them in some non-conference games. And so I remember Barta because he was a good athlete. He was a good player. He was cocky. And I wanted, as a kid in high school, to always beat Michael Barta. So I always remembered his name because, he was generally my size, played the same positions that I did. So I remembered Barta. Then when I moved into town and I knew that Barta was taking over as a head coach, I thought, well, kind of might be a guy that, when you're playing against him, you want to beat him. But when he's on your team, he's probably going to be a good guy to coach with. And so that first year, when Barta was a head coach, I was his pitching coach. We had a really good team at Johnston. We did not make the state tournament that year. But since then, since I got out of the program, Michael Barta has gone on to win 5 state championships. I think, actually, this is a fact. They won the state championship the year after I left that program, just to show you what was dragging that team down. It was clearly me. So once I got out of the program, Michael Barta goes on. He's winning 5 state championships. He's not even 40 years old yet, like I said. And I think the most impressive thing about it is he has turned Johnston High School, which is a large public high school, into a baseball school. Something I didn't think was possible. In this day and age, to turn a large public high school into a baseball school. So often, with all the publicity around basketball and football and high school NIL money, and here in the Des Moines area, there's this open enrollment and everything is so competitive, especially for basketball and football, which gets so much attention. And for a guy to come in to not only be a great coach, but also a great program builder and turn Johnston High School into a baseball school where you have them doing at Johnston things that colleges are copying from. I mean, they've got the youth program figured out. They've got the managers figured out. They've got tech. They've got analytics. They've got throwing programs. It's really, really remarkable what Barta has done at Johnston. And all I can do is applaud him and admire what he's built, how he coaches, and how he leads. And I wanted to get him on the podcast here. Just this past year, he won his 5th state championship. It was a very special season for Michael and his family. We'll get into that here in the podcast. I really urge you to hang on to the end to where we kind of talk more about this past season, because it was a trying and emotional and special season for Michael and for his family. But I've wanted to get him on the pod for a while, and I just thought this was the right time. Of course, the great Tom Griffin is back on the podcast as the co-host. Tommy and Coach Barta have coached together in a number of different capacities. They're buddies in their own right. So this was a really fun podcast to do. We actually break in the new podcast studio in this episode. And, it's not only, I think, a fun episode to talk about how Barta has built this program, how he's done it in a short time frame, but also, what do you have next? If you're a 38, 39-year-old guy, you've already kind of rewritten some of the record books in the state of Iowa. You still got 20, 25 years of coaching left under your belt. What's next for a guy like that? How do you stay driven? How do you stay motivated? So this one was really fun. It was personal for me because Michael's a great guy, a great friend. And it's fun to have Tommy on the podcast too. So enjoy today's episode with Moonlighter Michael Barta. Moonlighters, are you or someone you know moving down to Kansas City? Well, if you are, the one realtor that we trust and yet you need to be calling is the great Brian Sandvig. As you well know, Brian Sandvig is our producer here on the podcast, and there is not a better residential real estate advisor down in the Kansas City marketplace than Brian Sandvig. Call Brian Sandvig, shoot him a text. Hey, DM us on social media. We'll get you connected with Brian if you can't find him on all the socials, but he is there and he is active, and he is your Kansas City realtor, so give him a call. All right, we're opening up a new Moonlight Graham show studio right now. We're in the basement. First pod, Tom, that we've ever recorded in the basement. Tommy, you're back on the pod. Welcome back. And we've got one of your assistant coaches here. The Tom Griffin coaching tree is in the house right now. Tom, when was the first time that you coached with Michael Barta?
How many years ago would it have been? It's like 8 years ago, probably.
Yeah, 8 to 10 years ago.
So it's been a while. And I got the 8th grade head job, as most of our listeners know. And then I got to curate a staff. And they said, Michael Barta was already here the year before, so he is on your staff. And I said, perfect.
Yeah, definitely not somebody you chose or handpicked.
Tom, what'd you have him doing?
Before me, you were like the C team coach.
Yeah, I was the C team 3rd or 4th assistant. Yep.
Yes.
Coach him up.
Seriously. And then with me, you stayed C team with Ben Knight. And you and Ben Knight, who had a very successful high school girls tennis coaching career.
We all know this.
Just a good coach.
Yeah. We don't need to go back through the Ben Knight run.
But he's a good coach. But a tennis coach and the baseball coach are just lighting up C team scoreboards. Probably never lost a game.
Yeah, no, we didn't lose much. I mean, it was basically Ben Knight running the show, and I was making sure kids were hydrated and
hyped.
Yeah, and hyped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I stayed on as your 11th or 12th best coach on that 8th grade staff and tried to do whatever you told me to do.
As you guys got put up against Perry's A team.
that was I'll never forget losing 70-0 to Perry. That was one of my worst moments of my coaching career.
Barta, what'd you learn from Tom?
Well, to be honest, Tom is super organized. So he's going to come into practice with a great practice plan, and he also lets his coaches, do their little section of practice. So I think he put me on like the outside receiver that doesn't ever play, throw him passes, and I did. I think I did my job. While everybody else made sure that we could win a couple football games.
So Michael Barta, welcome to the pod.
You bet.
Roundabout way of introducing you, but coming here on the podcast, we've had some legends of the state of Iowa here. I'm looking back at your coaching record. You're not even 40 years old yet.
38, going to be 38 in a week.
Going to be 38 in a week. By the time this comes out, you'll be 38 years old, and you've got 5 state championships.
Yes, we do.
Like the record book needs to be updated. Have you looked at the records lately?
I don't. I have Coach O'Brien, who actually does more than I do, who's my third base coach, who keeps me up to date on that stuff. But
yeah, they got it wrong. They've got you currently with 3, but it's like they didn't count the 2022 one. So anyway, you got 5 now, which is, as I was doing my research, I'm pretty sure the record book is wrong here as I'm going through this. Is your goal when all is said and done to be the greatest high school baseball coach in state of Iowa's history?
No, that is not my goal. That's not what I go into. I do love to win though. Winning is a lot of fun, and winning breeds more winning. So they always what's the famous quote, like winning is a habit. So I mean, us three. I know you two decent. Well, you I got lucky enough to have you coach with us.
Part of one of the, I got the scrapbook around here.
You bet. I mean, I think we love to win, and so we can't play anymore. I mean, I could never play to begin with, but yeah, winning's fun. Not to be in a record book or anything though.
When did you know you wanted to be a coach?
High school. I would say high school for sure. I was probably overly vocal and annoying, and as a player, but I don't know. I think that as a coach, you got to be somewhat vocal, and so that's carried with me an opportunity to kind of be a captain in college, and I don't know if I was a good one, but and then I got to coach with Coach Edie for 1 year in college, who, mentored me really well, and he's a super successful coach at BV, and I think that kind of lit the fire.
What'd you take from him?
When you grow up playing like small town high school baseball, I was blessed to have a good high school coach in Jerry Spieler at Carroll Kemper, Kemper Catholic, I should say.
Yep.
Kemper Catholic, got to get that right. But he was wonderful. But then you take that another step to college, where you learn all the intricacies of like double cut, how to like manage the game, how to use your bench, how to have a good practice plan. And he sat me down. All the work he was doing outside of actual practice, you get a taste for that. Whereas just like a random small town high school baseball player, you don't know any of that. And so I was really blessed to have him, who had played in I think AA, AAA for quite some time. For a number of people, I think he was even offered a minor league job, but he was starting a family, and so he ended up coming back to BV.
How spoiled are the Kemper Knights to be playing on that field?
Oh my God, the Carroll Stadium.
Merchants Park is, one of the true treasures of the state of Iowa.
I got to work on it for 4 years. Scott Parcher, we got to shout out Scott Parcher. Been taking care of that field for, I'm going to throw this number out there, but it might be accurate, 50 years. And I worked for him, and that guy, if there's a spot of sod that doesn't look right, he can go pull that up and replant some sod right there. He is great. That place is, it's fun. I wish we could play a state tournament there sometime.
I know, Tom, that was always one of the treats. The CYO tournament every year was at Merchants Park in Carroll, and it was always a real treat to go down there and play for a couple of days there. My one career home run in high school came at Merchants Park off of Austin Steichen, Remsen St. Mary's. Never forget it. Tom,
neither will he.
Yeah. I think we probably took it to the Knights. As long as you keep the Molitor boys off base, we were going to be fine.
Playing in Carroll was awesome. Like everything about playing in Carroll. And I remember being a little kid going to CYO and watching my brother play. Like that felt like going to a big league stadium. And then so getting to play on it, and the grass is perfect, and it looks amazing. It plays amazing. And it's a fun place to watch a game. Like everything about Carroll's, the Merchant Stadium, just
you talk about that CYO that we all played in.
Yes,
we're some real talent.
Oh yeah,
on those teams back in the day.
Like Eric Werdekemper was in those. Yeah. The Sioux City Heelan always brought a really good squad. Of course, the Gales were a powerhouse all the time. Garrigan, Garrigan had, during our era, it was Ben Geelan and Aaron O'Kane and Brad Nelson, and they were always had good talent coming out of Garrigan.
You didn't mention any Kemper names.
Well,
the Muller boys.
The Muller boys.
The Hideoff boys.
Yeah.
The Hideoffs.
Yeah. I think we've told I won't get into my Tommy Hideoff, but I'm sure he remembers my name.
I was thinking I should have done this, but I was a little scared too, and I figured you would know Tim, or maybe you would know Bart. What was our record against each other? Because I don't know. You're 03. We're all the same age, but you're 03. Yep. We're 04. But so we would have played each other a couple times.
If my memory serves me correctly, I think we split. I think they got us your junior year, my sophomore year, and then I think we got you back the following year because we lost to Heelan in the championship game as juniors. Anyway, yeah, that's beyond the point.
Yeah. Those are great times, though. Great memories. And that was back in the day when they actually had legit tournaments on the weekend where there would be a champion crown. Yeah. Nowadays, it's like, we'll get some teams together, we'll play some games, and that's fine. But, how awesome would it be to have an old-fashioned tournament like that with a champion?
Well, here's my I wasn't planning on this, but I'm making a pitch for you right now. So this is Fort Dodge. You guys played at Fort Dodge. You played at the new park. I think Fort Dodge should host like a legit tournament every year of like the past champions from the previous year, and you do it like a new school, old school, where you have half the games at Dodger Stadium, which is built in the 30s, has got the ivy, it's the brick, it's the
and they've updated that well, at least done a nice job there.
And the field plays way nicer than it did 15 years ago. And then you've got the new school where you've got the new park, the Green Monster, they got clubhouses coming in and all that. They need a Johnston video board. That's one thing that they're missing. But I think that would be a cool tournament.
Oh, it'd be amazing. And I love going up to Fort Dodge High and playing on that field. Because the home run plays. It's not too deep.
No, it's like 290 down the lines.
And then oh my God, Iowa Central, St. Ed's. What's the actual name of the field?
Well,
Flattery Field?
Well, it should be.
Yeah.
I'm lobbying for that. It's just the baseball field at Harlan Rogers Park. I don't think there's we should get it in naming right. Oh, no, take it back. I think it's the Stark family field.
Okay.
Yeah, so Richard Stark, or it's actually Marion Morey Stark family field.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
You see the pictures, but we got an opportunity to go up and play Heelan in they had a little tournament this year. First high school thing I think they've done. And, oh my God, it is so fun to coach. I can't imagine playing. And Steffes is out there, one of my assistants, hitting balls off the wall. He might have sent you a text. He was trying to hit the flattery game. Oh, it was great, man. Oh, that's such a great place to play.
Barta, you're one of the most competitive guys I've ever met. Give me a story about when you were young and, being overly competitive got you into trouble. Because I got to imagine it's happened more than once.
So first of all, when you coached for me, I was a little bit of a psycho. I've calmed down a little bit. But when I was a little kid, one of my biggest problems was, and I actually tell this to my kids when I'm in a real bad mood with them and I don't think they're being competitive, is I didn't make it through a lot of recesses or PEs all the way through start to finish because I would get sent to the office or sit down on the stool out at recess for being too competitive, whatever the heck that is.
Yeah, no such thing.
But I mean, if you're going to play soccer at recess, the goal is to win. And I didn't, I hope we win 30-0, And then sometimes I got to take a little far. You maybe run a girl over who's trying to dribble a soccer ball or something like that might happen, and I got to sit on the bench. So
yeah, I see a lot of myself in that. I think you're even more competitive than I am, and I am a pretty competitive guy. But I did my fair share of running over girls. Kelly Nash comes to mind a couple of different times, Tom, at recess. But as a kid, so obviously every kid's dream is to become a Major League Baseball player or professional athlete. And I got to imagine that was your dream. When did it connect with you that maybe I don't have the talent to do, so I'm going to have to coach?
I think my last year of high school baseball, honestly, when I was a little kid, I felt like I was pretty much a high flyer. And then great story is you go to all these camps and stuff. And this is a side note story. You go to all these camps in high school and, you go around whoever the head coaches are of these colleges, and they'll tell you what's wrong with you, And one of the ones I remember in high school, I think freshman year I hit 10 bombs. And as my sophomore year, I went to some camp. They're like, yeah, you got to stop swinging up. Swing up. And when somebody told me that back in the day, that means I'm going to go home that night and swing down 500 times. So I was the best in the world at swinging down by the time I got to college. And so by senior year, when you hit 200, I think as a senior in high school, now my on-base percentage was 600 because I got hit 25 times. But when you hit 200, you kind of know in the back of your head, I'm not going to do anything with this sport.
So that's an interesting feedback that you get from that guy, that coach. Is the lesson there that not everybody's feedback, you shouldn't internalize all the feedback that you get from coaches because you're going to have a lot of coaches throughout your career?
I look at it as if you're going to tell a kid something, it better be right. And I was very bad at that early in my years as coaches, probably when you were around, and try to say less. There's so many things you can do with external goals now as coaches where let the result help the kid figure out, how to make fixes on his own. I don't know if I said that right, but for instance, my little kid, he's 5. Now, does he really like baseball? No. He'll play with dinosaurs 97% of his day. But when I actually get him swinging, we just have a home plate set up, X number of feet from the fence. We have moved that back lately. And I just tell him, hit it over the fence. And once in a while, my wife will say, hey, hit it over the shed instead of the fence, which makes him go oppo. But that's as far as I'm going to go with mechanics.
Good work out of Stacy.
Yeah, she's better than me most of the time. I mean, I married her for a reason.
What he said about Luke and dinosaurs is true, though. I can vouch for that. That kid likes dinosaurs.
I think Tom sent me home with, now we're up to 20 to 30 dinosaurs from the Griffin household.
Isn't it funny as you become a parent, everybody's trying to unload their toys onto you, and you're just no more toys, no more, please, no more toys.
Passing them around.
Yeah.
This can go to Lukey B's house.
Speaking of working with kids, I've always thought one of the challenges with coaching has been you can't teach somebody how to be competitive. And a frustrating thing about coaching younger kids is you want them to care as much as you do, but you can never teach them how to care, and they just kind of are what they are. How do you deal with coaching with kids that maybe don't care as much as you, or maybe aren't as competitive as you are?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems that coaches across our sport and maybe even at the college level are facing, that kids just grow up a little bit differently. I mean, we probably got our competitive juices from being in the backyard with our neighbor kids and wanting to kick their butts. And nowadays, like, most kids are going to grow up in their sport in a cage inside in December, January, hitting endless amounts of balls, and that's what they know of the sport. It's kind of sad. The days of, like, wiffle ball in the backyard are far and few between, where I think that's where I got my edge. Like, I wanted to win every day when I woke up at 9 a.m. Now, some kids are still doing that. That's amazing. But on the high school level, I think the only thing we can do is try to make incremental change as far as, like, mechanics and hitting, throwing, everything goes. So we try to make sure there's a competitive element in our practice every day. And there will be a winner and loser, and the losers will be punished. And if that's not in our practice plan, it's probably it needs to be a recovery day, or it's a lack of planning on my part.
So you speak about wiffle ball. You always had a wiffle ball tournament in your background. Does this still exist?
So, we put it up and took it down every year because Mom wasn't going to have that.
Right, but
yeah.
like, do you still have the tournament?
So we did one year. We didn't make it a state in 2015, and I put a huge one together for all the kids in our program, and it was an epic day. It was a ridiculously fun day. I'll never forget. The guys still talk about it. We still have videos from it. Oh, man.
But it was just a one-year thing?
Yeah, it's just a one-year thing. Because
you need to bring this back.
Well,
no wonder the program's in the hellhole, in the gutter.
We do need to bring it back, man. We created that in high school. Those, so a lot of those names you threw out, the Mulder brothers, Brad Barons, the Heidoff brothers.
Oh yeah.
We put those fields. We built different field every year. Every field looked different. We probably had a 5, 6, 7 year run of the fun part was you'd get your 8 captains that build the field, and then you had a big board and you draft, but there's only 48 getting in. So if you don't get drafted, too bad. You're coming back another year. Girls could get hit and take first base. Boys couldn't. If you're a little kid, you had different rules. Oh, it was great.
Wait a minute. How are girls getting drafted?
So girls are in the draft pool, and if we view them as more of an asset than some of these guys, they got drafted. There's some good players around there.
That is rough.
Yeah.
So when you came to Johnston, how old were you when you came to Johnston?
So I was about to get married to my wife, so probably 22, 23. 23 maybe.
And when did you take over the program? Did you take the program over at 23?
No, I was an assistant for Brett Posgate for 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you learn from Brett Posgate? When you came to Johnston, this is the biggest high school program you had ever been involved with because you came
100%.
from. Yeah. So I guess coming in, what did you learn about how 4A baseball at that time was different than what you grew up doing in Carroll?
Yeah, I mean, number one, well, at that time I don't think our numbers were too crazy, but still catastrophically different than, Kemper. Or I served for like May, June, and July. I did Newell Fonda. I was the head coach. I was the only coach there. I just finished with Steve Eady with the college season. They didn't have a coach. They called Steve. I took the job at Newell Fonda. 18 kids out for baseball. I think 8 were 8th graders. And
Wow.
and so then you bump to Johnston from that. And, it's a lot bigger. Honestly, there's a lot more going on. So, you're going to have your 9 players on the field who are all working with somebody different. By the way, I don't let my kids do that anymore. But they were all working with somebody different and not just working in the offseason. Like they would play a game, not like their results, and they're going to Bob over in, Waukee, and Bob's teaching them hitting lessons. They come back the next day and says, yeah, I'm not going to listen to you because I'm doing what Bob told me to do. So it was a crazy, hurdle or whatever you want to call it, obstacle to kind of get over. But Brett Posgate, back to him, literally the nicest coach I've ever met, and how kind he was to people rubbed off on me big time. Had an effect on me of, you should really try to treat your coaches and kids just in a great way. Like if the kids aren't having fun, then you're not doing your job.
So you're coaching with Posgate until you're like 25, and then
yes,
you take over the program as a head coach 13 years ago or so.
Yeah,
Is that right?
first year with you.
Yeah.
So that would have been 11, 12.
Yeah. Yeah, and Gabe, my buddy Gabe,
yes,
we all know
Gabe
was there.
Schultz.
I was there, and we had a pretty young staff at the time. At that time, what was your thought about how to build a program, and how has that changed over the last 13 years?
I thought the program at that time, now there was if you go back probably 5-6 years before that, Randy, we had a couple of extraordinary years. The best baseball season of all time is 2008, him going undefeated at Johnston. So, I mean, I think we should shout out him. But my feeling at the time was maybe how us three in this room grew up playing baseball, of playing really hard, being super competitive, sliding hard, hustling, wasn't there, right? I felt like we were soft. I mean, that's the easiest word I can put on it. And so my goal initially was, how do we make this a lot
edgier?
A lot more, yeah, perfect word. Have an edge, get competitive, get dirty, you know, toughen these sons of guns up.
Yeah. Well, and then you win one the next year.
Yeah. Special group.
I mean, that junior group when I was coaching, the next year, I mean, you had the great Joe Hawks, you had Mike Kinney. I mean, you could go on and on, you know, down that list. And that felt like every now and again you get lucky as a coach where it's like this group of guys played together and they're tight. Yeah. And to your point, like you don't have to teach them to care about one another, to be competitive, because it's already kind of existed within that group. Mm-hmm. So how lucky do you feel, like looking back, that you kind of had to start? You started with a junior class like that.
Yes, and not only that, they weren't soft. They had some like blue collar to them. They had some, like, you know, starting left fielder Adam Richmond was a farmer, right? Right now, I think he's excavating. Like, that's what he loves. You know, you got Sam Shady, who played center. He was a wrestler, loved to wrestle. With Jacobson, who was a DH. You had, I don't want to go through everybody because we'd sit here all night, but like McCune was our number 1/number 2 with behind Hawks, who right now is like, I think, a parole officer, and he's jacked out of his mind, and he's a tough kid, right? So we had some pieces there. Yeah, I was definitely lucky to get that group right away. And that's what we needed, because they set the tone for the future. So
I actually want to go back to a point that you made about the private lesson stuff. Yeah. So how have you drawn the line there? Because you're right. The baseball community in Des Moines is very, very strong. Yeah. But you got a lot of like ex-guys that are doing stuff on their own, whether it be hitting, pitching. A lot of guys are doing a great job, know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
it's
there
great.
Are a lot of good guys.
But it does kind of work against somebody that's trying to build a program that has uniformity throughout a program. I saw that when I was coaching with you at Johnston. I saw it when I was coaching at Dowling. Like, it's a real challenge, because that parental influence, like, how do you tell a parent, like, I know what's best for your kid better than you do? That's kind of what you're saying when you're drawing that line. Like, how have you been able to manage that?
Well, first of all, I got over myself a little bit. I felt like I was like spending my whole year going to everything and anywhere under the sun to learn. And so when I would come back, my first 5 years as coach, and I was like, well, I know what I'm doing, and I don't want other people talking to my kids. Well, you don't know what you're doing. To this day, I don't know. I mean, there are millions of people that I coach against. There are people I coach against that know more than I do about the sport. So I got over myself a little bit, but to the point, like, I think it's okay for a kid to be coached by multiple individuals. However, I think once January rolls around in our sport in high school, they have to be done with that. Like, January through July has to be you getting together with your group, seeing incremental change, taking the data, applying the data, coming up with a plan for your kid, and nothing's interrupting that growth process. So for me, the state changed rules where October, November, December, we cannot touch our kids, besides they can lift and everything. But I tell them the fall is theirs. Now, we do train in September because you're able to do that, but I don't care if they're training outside of me. They're playing sticks or whoever they're playing with. I like that now, but I've told my kids for years, I tell my freshmen every year they come in, I don't want to see you going to a lesson or doing anything once January gets here. It has to be our time. And there's some stuff that I've read to that and why we believe in that, but I think that's the answer for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think part of it too is just like controlling workload.
Yeah.
Like, how are you supposed to control workload as far as how much guys are working out, throwing, especially during the winter months, throwing, if they're throwing with you and then throwing with somebody else, and then their dad's probably in their ear wanting to work on their curveball behind the scenes, and it's like
100%.
How am I ever supposed to know what I'm supposed to be prescribing to this kid?
Yeah, and you're trying to build a routine of like push, recover, middle day, recover, push, and you can't mess with that. So I do think there is also an educational piece to your guys. Like, this is the way we need you to perform. If you go mess with this system, Don't expect to stay healthy. Don't expect to see growth, And so I think the educational piece that we educate the kids is a whole nother part to it.
So going back when we were, 20 years ago, when we were 18 years old, everything I felt like was push, like harder, 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 harder. There is no break. And now I feel like there's so much more data into like you need to rest. And on rest days, you need to rest and you need to recover. And that's where the real leaps happen. How much would you, Michael Barta, have struggled with the rest part if you were 17, 18 years old?
Especially when you're just throwing, like you can't hit during this time of year, or you're a PO. Like I think about, there are days when I look over at my pitching coach and I'm like, that's one of our best pitchers. And he doesn't look like he's doing anything today.
Yeah.
I go over to him like, can't we do something with Carter Woolhams today? And Buckaloo, who is a brainchild, was my pitching coach. And he just knows what he's doing. He's like, well, this is his recovery day, man. What does recovery mean to you? And I'm like,
this is where you got this is where you need me back in the program. This is where you got guys like me. I could teach that kid how to become the greatest fungo hitter ever.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got 50 hours of fungo work for you, man. And because then college, there's so much downtime for pitchers, and like that's where you just got to make them the best fungo hitter on the team.
Yeah, they did pick up a lot of fungo golf this year.
Okay,
they did get into some heavy meditation stuff. Some Buck did some grounding with them where they literally take their shoes off and go on a hike. I mean, they did some weird stuff. But to your point, they aren't working out.
I know.
On those recovery days.
Yeah, when I was at Dowling, I would do some of that grounding stuff, and I don't want to actually give it a label because I wasn't like, it's not like I read some book, but we used to sit on that hill, and we'd sit on that hill and we'd visualize. And I thought that was effective, because it's like to quiet yourself. This is the mound that you're going to be throwing on. Let's spend 15 minutes, no grab ass and all this stuff, and just visualize success. And I think, especially with pitchers, it's such a mental game at times that you've got to be able to quiet the noise,
especially in the world we live in.
Yeah,
I mean, some of those kids just love the time of being just with themselves.
So going back to building the program, so you win the championship in year 2. Your goal early on was to instill an edge, instill a kind of a culture of competition. How has that evolved over the last 10 years? Since you won that first one, and where you're not 28 years old anymore, and you've probably mellowed a little bit, and you've probably grown in some way. So how has that changed over the last 10 years?
I would say the biggest change is what the coaches do. I make a practice plan, and once in a while I yell. But other than that, we've hired really good coaches who research their area of the game very, very hard in the off season. And now when practice comes, it's not this, everybody shows up at the same time, everybody does the same thing. It's very individualized. And that's been the biggest change for us, and we've seen more individual growth because of that, which means then, the teams get better. But all the title teams and all the teams we have every year are still very different from each other. But I think the biggest change has been how we handle our coaches.
So talk to me about building a coaching staff then. So what are you looking for? Because if you look at the Johnston championship picture, there's, I don't know how many 10 coaches in that picture. And then there's another, how many managers that you have. Like, you've built a small company of assistant coaches and managers and researchers and everything else. And it's incredible. And I'm just, from the outside looking in, you've just done an amazing job with that.
Well, and the guys I've hired, there's a number of guys that have worked for me that have not liked me. And I especially early on in my career, I didn't treat my coaches very well. And I could think of names like Gabe. You mentioned Gabe Schultz. To this day, I text him every year. I'm like, "Hey, come back and coach for me." And I never treated my coaches well. I didn't recognize how amazing you and Gabe were for me back then. So first and foremost, like, we have the right guys right now, and so they don't need me around. They don't need me to pat them on the back. They're running the program. But when you think about designing that, you have to have good freshman coaches to start. I think the kids are coming into the program, and you have to have this balance of, we're going to teach this competitive edge, this work ethic, but not run them off, because we want to keep our numbers up. And so I think like Miles Moa is my head freshman coach. He is one of the most important people in my program. And then partnered with Zach Hendrickson, who is his assistant, who's a new coach, who's a pitching coach at Mason City for a long time. And Nick Crandall, who was a former player of mine who pitches at Western Michigan. I think those guys are my freshman staff right now. So kids come in, they get those guys. All were college athletes. Mm-hmm. All know exactly what they're doing in all their different areas of the game. So Moa's our hitting guy. Crandall could coach catchers. Moa does outfield as well. Hendrickson is a pitching expert. They get everything. And so now it's like we take a jump right away. And so then we need a great sophomore staff, which we've had. Now we got to replace a number of pieces there. That's another story. And then they eventually get to me, and they've had multiple years in with great coaches that are actually varsity level coaches,
right,
who have been happy with doing the freshmen. Then they actually come up with me, all those coaches. Like at the end, people make fun of us because they're like, oh, there's 12 coaches in the dugout. Yeah, that's my 3 freshmen, my 3 sophomore, my 2 JV, and my varsity staff.
Well, it shows that you've got a program.
Yeah, it's not just
talent coming through.
Yeah.
It's we've built a program.
Yeah.
So not only that, though, but like the manager stuff.
Yes.
Because this is incredible. Yep. I mean, it really is. Like, played 4 years of college baseball. Iowa Central, never had a manager. We had a manager who had, like, special needs. Like, that was our manager, the guy that just rides with us all the time. Then at UNI, Division I program, no manager. Like, we had Greg Sabers would hang out with our program like his last year, and he's moved on to Perfect Game now, and he's doing amazing stuff. But, like, we didn't have anybody that's doing anything near what you guys are doing now. And I feel like college baseball is almost mimicked, like the University of Iowa's management program almost has mimicked what you guys
or we're mimicking them.
Yeah, one way or the other.
Yeah.
There's a good thing going in both areas there. So where did you get the idea to start that? How did it come to be? And what do they do for you now?
Ex-former coach Kyle Dupik, not to be mixed up with Ryan at Concordia. So Ryan Dupik was one of my roommates in college. Played at Iowa and then went to BV. Anyway, he runs a wonderful program over at Concordia in Nebraska. They're one of the best baseball programs in AIA. His brother Kyle, big into baseball, big into data, brought on some freshman kids to be his manager. I had a couple managers at my level not doing anything like the managers do now. And he started with some people that stuck with it, and we kept upping the ante on what they do. And now we have managers who are producing printouts before every game of like Carter Williams is pitching tonight. Here's all his percentage he throws for a strike. Here's how they're being hit. Here's how they're being chased. Here's the counts that we want to throw each pitch in highlighted. So another example is like Pierce Anderson was one of our good pitchers this year. His curveball, like you'll watch it in the pen. The old school way of coaching would be, I'd say, big time hammer. Great hammer, fastball moves up, curveball moves down. They work opposite of each other. It's going to work. It's going to be great. And it probably would work really well if you're like pitching it in the same tunnel. If you tunneled it well, it does work. But managers are telling me, hey, they're hitting 600 on his curveball. The eye test is not working. Like, we need to not throw that pitch. Well, then they dug into it more, and they're like, well, they're hitting 600 when counts get to 1 strike or 2 strike. So we made a rule for the pitch. You're only throwing the pitch in a 0 strike count, and after that it's not usable. And so it's just stuff like that.
Do these managers really have the balls to say that to you?
Some of the managers in the past, yes, definitely. In fact,
like, hey, Barta, we're not throwing the curveball anymore.
Yeah. I mean, tell a little story about Savannah Dennis. She'll laugh.
That's who I was thinking of.
Yeah. So some of the big names, Lexi Cahill, Savannah Dennis, Chloe Williams,
the big names,
Will Birch, Evan Westling. Yeah, we got to throw these names out. But anyway, Savannah Dennis. I remember one practice. We got bullpens going on. All our Rhapsody units are up, which is just a unit that tracks like spin and making sure pitches are moving appropriately, and which is a whole nother conversation we could get into. But I remember coaching a kid up, and it was supposed to be a night where we just recorded our first field of data. And then from there, we designed practices around it based on the data. And Savannah's collecting it, and she's managing all these mounds at once. And I'm coaching the kid. And Savannah goes, I thought this was a data collection night. We're slowing down the night. And I'm like, I kind of like ripped her a new one. And then afterwards, I'm like, God, you're right. Like, you're right. And that was the last time I yelled at Savannah because she was right, like everything she did. So, yeah, I mean, those managers really took it and ran with it. Now we have, we just lost one in Drew, but we have 2 girls with us right now, Caroline and Ellie, and they are really, really good at what they do. And we also changed them with, like, can you make some more advanced statistics that would tell us more about our hitters? And so we have, like, this DOS, Dragon Offensive something or other statistic, I think is what they came up with. And it basically takes all of hitters and it makes it like a war for high school. And it tells us, and it's crazy, like some of those statistics will tell us like, you shouldn't play these kids. And it's right. Like
that's what I was going to ask. Like, how much of it is it more that's informing opinions you previously had and strengthening those opinions, or teaching you something you didn't know, like the curveball?
Yeah, I do think the eye test, the old-fashioned way of coaching, still works, right? But it's when you dig deeper into like when to throw pitches, or another example is like a hitter cannot hit pitches in this zone. Like I can't get that from the eye test, and so that data piece will tell us, okay, like we need to teach him to lay off pitches in the upper quadrant in the strike zone. Even though it's a strike, we're not going to swing at it because that's what our data's telling us.
And so you have the technology too to track that, not only during practicing games about like where it's actually into a quadrant, because you know as well as I do, like those old pitching charts that we would do by hand, like. You know, I'm spaced off half the time as if I'm doing the chart, right? It's like, where was that pitch? I don't know. Up, you know.
Yeah, just put it somewhere.
What was it? I think it was a slider. You know, like that kind of thing.
Yep.
And that's why it wasn't very useful, because it was being done by either high schoolers or college kids behind the plate who were checking out.
And that's how we started. I mean, even as of like 4 or 5 years ago, like I mentioned Savannah, like she was doing those charts and then applying, and then dumping it in Excel and like, you know, spitting out data. But now we've purchased some things that are really expensive. Like we have Flight Scope, and Flight Scope's going to tell us exactly where the pitch is at in the zone, the exact pitch that was thrown. And so, yeah, it's easier to spit out data now.
Tom, being in the Johnston system, what have the other sports stolen from what the baseball has done?
I think probably the hardest thing to mimic is the culture. And like the fact that there's, I'm guessing, I don't know, 140 kids in your program, 150 kids in your program. Like the fact that you have 150 kids who are diehard baseball players, that they're all in, that they're attending, showing up and working hard. I think that's something that is like the literal meaning of the word remarkable. Like that is something people talk about. And it's like, how do we get kids to, I'm a classroom teacher. How do we get kids to show up for class like that? How do we get kids to take care of a classroom the way these kids take care of their baseball equipment?
Well, when you figure that out, you'll be a millionaire.
Exactly.
You'll be speaking everywhere.
But I think that's a huge thing. So I think the culture, and then I think the other thing that's really remarkable is the consistency. Like, I mean, you need a baseball team. You don't win baseball state championships with one player or two players. It's a team. And so then how do you graduate this group of seniors and bring in the next group and have that consistent level of success? And Johnston has really good sports. We have really good coaches. And a lot of those people are really good classroom teachers, and they're awesome to work with. But still, it's like the bar is so high that even though we have successful programs, it's still like how do we get there? How do we get to the next level? And so I think that's something baseball has done is, like I said, the consistency and then that work ethic and accountability that kids have.
It's amazing, and I'm not trying to just pump you up here, Barta, but I think the thing I admire you most for is kind of what Tom was describing there, is you have turned a 4A suburban school into a baseball school, which I did not think that was possible. Because when you looked at the Iowa record books and like baseball schools throughout, it's small private schools or it's small town schools, right? It's like your Norways, it's your Mason City Newmans, it's Key High of Lansing, like Davenport Assumption. You know, like you understand how if you have a captive audience, Decorah, yeah. If you have a captive audience here, that you can make something special happen because like the town is going to do this. It's way different here in like the metro where there's so many demands, and like basketball and football are way sexier, right? And it's tough to build a baseball culture, but you've done that. And I think that's the remarkable thing.
I think though, like our culture has been good probably due to I've been blessed with some really good coaches around me that have helped me with that. But also, culture is created from winning. And, like, we talked about the 13 team that we won. Yeah. After that, remember, we rolled in 2 different groups that went to the Senior League World Series and Little League World Series. So it's not like they're walking into my program and I'm like, oh, yeah, let me turn these guys that are average ball players. And no, I mean, Peyton Williams and Jack Dreyer are pretty freaking good. I mean, and so they go win us a title, you know, and, yeah, the team did. I mean, I'm not saying, like, it was Jack and Peyton. Like, there was a number of other, like, great players and great people, but
those kids are special.
Well, and then they win it, and then that makes it a lot easier for me to try to continue to build, you know.
But to that point, in the environment that we are in here in the Metro, and I'm not sure how much you guys can comment on it, but I can, like, open enrollment, Dowling, like, basically it's a feeding frenzy for athletes around here. And, you know, you see it like, oh, the best wrestlers end up at Southeast Polk. No way. You know, like football, it's like there's recruiting going on all over the place. And there's a lot of good baseball programs around here too, like Waukee and Dowling and Polk, and Urbandale won 2 in a row just a few years ago. Like, so, and with people, if you didn't have a good baseball culture going, like, less people would be attracted to playing baseball at Johnston, and they'd wind up somewhere else. And I think that's a real thing that is, people outside of the Metro don't really get it, but it's a very competitive marketplace here.
Is. Like, if we weren't getting our job done as coaches, we would lose 1 or 2 every year to somewhere else.
Yes,
for sure. And we've had a couple come to us. Like, there's no doubt if a coach would say, you know, well, you know, Tyne Weeden moved from Marshalltown to us because he did when he was a freshman, I would say, yeah, absolutely he did. And we were very blessed to receive him. Or Adam Keiko moved over here. And so I will be the first to admit that. Now, we did not recruit him. I'll be real clear on that. Those guys moved here. But, yeah, if we weren't doing our jobs, we would lose some of our Johnston kids somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's why you run a little bit of the risk of, hey, when you're at Johnston, you're part of the program and you can't work with other folks. And I think it's ballsy, but I also think you've got the track record to prove out, like, hey, look at what we can do from a management standpoint, or, like, you know, the data standpoint. Look who we've put into college. Look at who's ended up playing professionally. You know, like Peyton Williams and Dreyer, and the list goes on and on about guys that are still playing today. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just a huge credit to you and the program that you've built.
And the staff and, like, development. I think that's the one thing we'll always talk about. And I'm not saying, like, our program's any better than the ones you just named, because, like, you know, the CML is a piece. I mean, we could be last in the CML next year. Like, that's how good the league is. But no, I think development is definitely all we talk about as coaches. How are we going to take a kid from a freshman to senior, and that they're clearly moving forward? And if they're not, we're not doing our jobs. Because as a high school coach, yeah, we want to win, and that will always be the number one focus. But if you're not developing, kids feel like there's better options. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's our main topic every coaching meeting.
The one consistency that you've had throughout your program has been your Uncle Tom.
Oh, yeah?
What's been like Tom working with Tom?
So, first of all, you said something earlier I'll always remember. Tom made this comment in our first year together. We were at a convention in Anaheim learning about baseball. We've traveled everywhere to learn. And he said, we need to make Johnston a place where kids feel like if they're born, or even their dads or moms, if they're born around the metro area, they need to send their kid to Johnston to play baseball. That was something Coach Steff has said a long time ago, and it stuck with me. It, like, hit me right in the heart. And I'm not saying, like, that's our ultimate goal. I don't need everybody transferring over here, because we have kids coming up, and I want to see those kids that have lived the purple their whole life, you know. But it was a great comment. And so he's been a staple of what we've done forever. More than anything, I don't know how to, like, describe this, but we do something called life survival, which is basically we're talking about something in life, and when we apply it to life and then baseball, and it's every practice starts with that. Well, there's nobody better at that than Tom. Tom teaches kids how to become how to grow up, and how to not be soft, and how to work for something. He's a proven businessman that's done it already and retired from it. Obviously has a primo job with ESPN as well. So he has accomplished any goal he's wanted to in his life. He passed a lot of those life lessons on, which connects him to kids. So he's like kind of a connector for us. And a lot of the kids leave our program. They don't say like, oh, I feel so close to Coach Barta. A lot of them leave and say, I feel so close to Coach Steffes.
Yeah. So you're on a good little run here. Obviously, 13, you win your first title. But then you win it again in 17, runner-up in 19, champion in 20, runner-up in 21, and then back-to-back in 22 and 23.
It's been a really good run. I'm not going to lie. It's been fun as hell. It really has.
Are there any specific teams, moments, games, situations that stick out to you out of this past 6-year run here?
Yeah, I mean, the one that sticks out to me is 2018. We didn't make it to the state title. We were like, I'm not exaggerating this. We were like 37-3, ranked 1 start to finish, and we got upset in the first round.
By who?
Washington, CR Washington. Ooh. They had 2 great pitchers. I don't know. Anyway, that sticks out to me because that team was amazing. So you always win it because you're the best team. I mean, you've got to have a lot of luck. And they do the single elimination, man. Yeah. We all know our sport's not supposed. Single elimination is really hard in baseball. So yeah, we've had a lot of luck. Things that pop out to me. 17 was extremely tight and talented group. 19 was the best offensive team I've ever had. We didn't win it, but we went to the title. But they were legendarily good. I mean, if you look up the stats, it just blows your mind that we didn't win it. We did have our number 1 go down. He had Tommy John that year, and that kind of set us behind the 8 ball. 20 was the COVID year, so you remember all the you'd have a 3-hour practice and you'd have an hour cleaning gear with sanitizer. Ugh. Oh my God! But we got her done that year. 21 was a year we went to the title. We lost to a great PV team. But 22 and 23, 22 was a Little League World Series team. So they had it all before I touched them. They really did. And more than anything, I think that group had a great group of dads and people that just got them to love baseball. They would have practiced for 5 hours every day with no complaints. So it's just been a different group every year.
What's your take on Iowa high school summer baseball? Because for a guy like you that's playing to the last final game of the season almost every year, Michael Barta doesn't get a lot of time off.
No, not at all. My wife hates me by the end of the summer. There's no doubt. I think she's warming back up to me now. Like she went with me to the fair. Tom Saul's at the fair.
Yeah. Romance.
So yeah. We're coming back around. But I love summer baseball. You guys, Tim, I know you played a lot of baseball in your life, and you played probably some really cold games. What I know about other states, and I've traveled to a number of other states to talk to random coaches. High school baseball in a lot of these northern states, I'd say everything above like Kansas, is not really important to anybody. And then you get into the fall where there's the club scene or there's the Legion scene or whatever they do in their state, and it becomes a big deal. And they'll play 60 games with their club team. And I think if we push up too much, we're going to lose this incredible, state tournament that we have for baseball. And so but could we push up to April 1st? Yeah, I think we could probably do that.
Yeah. I'm a proponent of Iowa high school summer baseball. I think it's an advantage at this point because when you go to like Johnston's playing Heelan in Fort Dodge, there's 30 scouts at that game.
Yeah.
Why? Because no one else is playing summer baseball. And the only game in town is Iowa high school summer baseball. And so you got the perfect games and the PBRs and all the college scouts come to those games. And I think it's actually an advantage. Now it's more of an advantage for like the juniors and the sophomores, right, than it is the seniors because the hay's in the barn at that point for seniors. But like, I don't think anybody gets missed nowadays.
Yeah.
Like with the amount of scouting resources that are out there, it used to be like nobody's going to see our kids. Like everybody sees every kid now.
Yeah.
Yep. With all the scouting services and with everything else, especially with the video and the data that everybody can get access to. I think now it's the point where the script is flipped and it's actually an advantage for kids.
Yeah. And like you said, if your kid's not being seen, go make a video for 20 minutes on the field.
That's what Timmy was doing when I got here. He had one of the twins throwing the ball. Yeah. He had the Rapsodo going upstairs.
Yeah, can I borrow that and put it in my backyard? Yeah. Because, I feel like there's comeback here.
The boys are almost won, so you got to be ready for that.
Yeah, they're about ready to start. Yeah, full scale training.
We've spent about $10,000 on scouting for Jack.
Well, his 8th birthday is tomorrow.
He turns 8 tomorrow, so he's
man, yeah.
We're behind the 8 ball a little bit.
How often are you stressed out? So I'm trying to figure out like how much of myself is in you. So when I got stressed out the other day and I had to go into my backyard and I threw a bullpen. Like I don't think
I've been there.
It's not like going on a run doesn't do anything for me because as soon as I want to start the run, I want to be done with the run. So it's almost more stress because I like immediately have a time that I have to beat and it's like it's this kind of tortured cycle. But I can go back and like throw 100 pitches in the backyard and for me that's therapy. Like what's your de-stress or therapy when just things get too competitive and too tight in your own head?
Man, that is a great question. Honestly, this is going to sound like not that interesting, but I love nights in the backyard and actually pitching balls to my own kid and like just watching him hit and enjoy it because you get so dug deep into data and lineups and changes and keeping kids happy. Like you want kids to love this experience. And when you have 35 in your dugout every night and 9 are on the field, keeping kids loving, like I want them to love it, and that weighs on you. But like just seeing a kid go out and play the sport we love the way we grew up doing it, when my kid's in the back and will actually hit a couple with me before he runs back to his dinosaurs, that's my stress really.
Which coach have you stolen the most from?
Stevie did a big job for me at BV. I would say Pete Lauritsen.
Oh,
yes.
Swing faster.
Yes. I'd say he is probably my number one.
And where's Pete now?
He's back to Kirkwood. So he was Nyack, then he was Cleveland Indians, all the way up to a possible major league hitting coach. And then the lifestyle, I need to talk to him about it more. I haven't talked to him as much in the recent years, but he's a guru. And nowadays, he's really locked into his craft. He doesn't do all the speaking arrangements and everything like he used to do. So I try not to bug him anymore. But he is a guru. I also think old Iowa Western coach Raridan, who's now at where is he at?
He's at Western Kentucky.
Western Kentucky, great culture guy.
Yeah.
And I know all the coaches at Iowa know that already. So I'm not saying anything they don't know.
Right.
But those guys they're really good.
Yeah, I don't know Raridan at all, but it seemed like you two were stealing from each other, or you were stealing from him,
he
or
wasn't stealing from me.
But like, kind of that same like ultra competitive culture where it's like, hey, if you're going to play here, you're gonna have to compete at the highest level. Otherwise, like, there's other places for you to play. That was the culture that Iowa Western built, and like it got the best of the best for 15 years.
It did, and was always in the national tournament, winning it. I think the thing I got from him that was awesome, besides all the little quotes and how he runs his practice and everything, those were great. But what I loved was, I'm there on a Saturday, middle of the day. He gave me 5 hours with no lunch break, nonstop, him talking, nobody else in the room, me and him. I did think I picked up my water and took a drink at one point, but it was like 5 hours had passed and he just gave me time. That was awesome. But he said something in there, well, we should call it a day and I got to get up in the morning. We got 5 a.m. lift. And I'm like, well, do any of your assistants run your lifting for him? He's like, yeah. Whoever, Bobby runs my lifting. And I'm like, all right. So, but he goes, but I have to be there. And so I just kind of like asked him a couple questions about that. He's like, if you want something to happen, you better be at every single minute of it and make sure your effort is equal to or better than your kids. And I was like, it just stuck with me. Like, don't complain about the weight room not being good if you're not there every minute. And I'm not saying I am. I mean, I got teaching and family and everything, but he's a worker, and I just took a lot from him.
Back when I was coaching with you for that 1 year, I remember at the end of practice one time we were having like a pop time contest. Me, you, Schultz. I don't remember who else was doing it. I think some of the guys on the team were having it. I remember it was like 9 o'clock at night. It was super late. None of us had warmed up. And all that was the closest to getting hurt I had ever been in my life because like we got really competitive. And are you still doing that? Like involved in practice like that? And have you gotten hurt yet?
So I am still doing all that, but it's starting to get real embarrassing. I mean, like, real bad. I love catching pens, so I'll catch all our guys every year. Most pen nights, I'll sit back behind a plate all night. I got to have the Rhapsody TV right in front of me so I can give accurate feedback. But And I'll always like rotate the guys that see me every night. But Pierce Anderson, who was up to 93 for us this year, and in a side bullpen in the middle of our year outside, hit me in the toe. And my toe was like the size of a baseball and black and blue for like 2 to 3 weeks. And it made me really question whether I should keep doing this. I mean, like, as far as like being too involved, you know?
Well, I remember you had me. You probably don't remember this. My arm does. One night we sucked at hitting curveballs. So going back to before we had data, it was just like the theory was we can't hit curveballs. We need to get better 2-strike approach against curveballs. So I remember I had to throw curveballs for like an hour. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
It was like it was a scrimmage. There were 2 teams, and I was the all-time pitcher, just throwing curveballs, and everybody started at a 2-2 count. And I just had to throw curveballs for like an hour. Oh my God. And I don't think my arm has been right since. But I think the hammer was looking good that night.
Oh, yeah. It was looking good. I think I remember some of that. I think I remember the kids walking by and be like, Barta's really expect us to hit this?
I believe that.
Sit down, Connor Jacobson. So I guess where I want to end is, you guys win the 23. You had kind of an improbable semifinal championship run where just, 2 really amazing wins, a good run to end it up. And you look at the championship picture and it's the team, and then it's a picture of your daughter. And, this is something that, frankly, we tried to have you on the podcast at the start of the year.
Yeah.
Remember, it was right at the time where Bridget's health was failing. And I'm sure this season was kind of inspired in her memory, in her honor. What was it like kind of having to pick up the pieces of your life after the passing of your daughter and dealing with that? It's hard for even me to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because it had to be so challenging for you.
Yeah. Baseball's been a special place. My daughter and I connected. So her abilities failed. Special rare disease, for those listening, like Alzheimer's. So she got to age 3, and then from age 3 to 10, she went from kind of pretty much a normal kid to there was just no ability left to do anything. But when she was really young, 2 and 3, like she loved ball. She would swing a lot, sweet lefty swing. And we connected with ball. My wife was big into baseball. Her dad, Hall of Fame basketball coach for Marshtown, but also was assistant baseball coach in Marshtown. And so that family loved baseball. Her brother, Nick, I played with in college. Stacy, for 2 to 3 years, came to every single home and away game with Bridget. And so I coached third then. I was still thinking I was a pretty good coach. This was before I had Quinn O'Brien coach third because I knew it was really bad. But Bridget would always sit by the third base coach's box, and I'd go over to her every inning I ran out there and just say hi to her. And she was like my connection, like that. We connected every day when I was at baseball. And so, to not have her this year, that was a big loss. Some parents bought a bench with her face on it, which was pretty cool. But yeah, it was hard coming back initially, like really hard getting back into the swing of things because you just feel like you've lost this huge piece of yourself is the best way I can explain it. That's the way my wife always explains it to people, and it's perfect. The house will always feel just a little empty. Like even on good nights with my kids, it'll just feel a little empty. And so yeah, it was really hard to get back. But the kids in this group really supported me. They wore Bridget shirts for an infield one time without me knowing. They put one of my assistant AD, Melissa Cross, up to the shirt design, put Bridget's face on the state shirt. And the kids just did a number of things for me without maybe even their parents telling them to do it. Like mention Bridget to me, talk about Bridget, ask how I'm doing. Like kids in the past haven't done that. Mm-hmm. And at the end, one of the kids on the team said, "Hey, Barta, this was big for us, but it's also big for you. We kind of want it for you and your daughter, Bridget." And it was just like, I don't know. I'll always remember this title because I'll remember how much conversation I had about my daughter during this time. And it ended up being a wonderful outlet for me. Instead of just sitting in my house and just thinking about all the negative thoughts you might think, baseball became a very positive outlet for me. So I don't know. It's hard to put into words everything we've went through this year as a family, but yeah, she'll always be with me. And we're just trying to figure out our new reality, and there's good days and bad days. Like right now, I really enjoy talking about it. You might talk to me tomorrow, and I may be like in a terrible mood about it, But I think, keeping the whole family in a positive state of mind is the biggest challenge of like going through something like that. Like my wife, who didn't have the outlet of baseball, or my son, who was in the same room with her for his whole life, really, really struggled initially. And so, yeah, I don't know, not to bring our viewers down, or our viewers to put them in a bad mood, but I appreciate you bringing it up, because getting an opportunity to talk about my daughter and how wonderful her impact in my life was. She never cried and was never in a bad mood. She positively impacted my life in a good way.
We put a lot of importance on sports, and ultimately they pale in comparison to almost everything else in our lives. But it is cool to see how you can have therapy or find solace in sports. And just as you guys were making that run at the end of the year, Schultz and I were texting, because we're both watching the game at our house, and we're, oh my gosh, can you believe it? Like this just happened. And that we both kind of made the connection at some point in the championship game that like, man, Barta lost Bridget earlier this year, and this is kind of a magical or a special thing. And I can't imagine what you've gone through as a dad and as a husband. It's been so challenging, but it was cool to see the season end up the way that it was, knowing that it's just a small piece of the story, but it's going to provide some good connections with not only the team, but maybe good memories with your family as well. In a year that's probably had a lot of darkness in it, to have some real light and some real joy to come from it. And memories you'll have forever.
Yeah, and you couldn't have said it better. Like it was like what you said, the state tournament run too. Like having Stacy and Luke and Greta there to like celebrate that moment with me, which is something Bridget always did with us. But I don't know, just like you said, I mean, way better than losing that last game.
Yeah,
and yeah, it definitely was a bright spot in the year, like you said. So you couldn't have said it better. But yeah, I mean, I felt too like this is going to sound. I'll stop talking about it after this. But there was a lot of crazy plays in that Ames game, and I said a couple prayers before the game to Bridget, and I do feel like at times she's like sprinkling a little luck towards me, and hopefully she did. Maybe that's why we pulled that out, because we were behind the 8 ball a couple times in that game.
Well, it was a special way to end, and I know it meant a lot to you. And frankly, it's just been awesome to see you continue to have the success that you have, man. It was fun coaching with you for that year, to see your passion and competitiveness up front. And it's great to see a baseball program. Like I love the game of baseball. I wish baseball was the number one sport at every high school in the country. Like that's just how I love it. If it were up to me, soccer would be illegal and everybody would have to play baseball. And that's just the way it should be, if you want my opinion on it. And so it's awesome that you've built this powerhouse at Johnston. And I think it's so super cool. So thanks for coming on the pod. It's great to see you, and continued success.
Thanks for having me, guys. And I hope to be back at some point where we can maybe dig into Tom Griffin's dynasty in 8th grade football a little bit more.
Hey,
I mean, so let me know when that
open door policy.
Yeah, we'll switch seats, and I'll be the color guy, and we'll go with that.
We'll do it in the sauna.
We'll see what happens here. Yeah. Big year.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.